In the quiet corners of an ancient library, beneath the soft glow of a flickering lamp, 3 seemingly unrelated individuals stumbled upon envelopes that would irreversibly alter the courses of their lives. Each envelope contained the results of a DNA test they had never expected to receive. First story. The day Doris met Bobby at their mutual friend Jenna's wedding, it seemed like fate was in a particularly playful mood. The reception was held in a lush garden adorned with fairy lights that twinkled like stars caught in nets above them. Doris, in her light blue dress and a smile that could outshine the sun, caught Bobby's eye the moment she laughed at a joke across the room. "You know the bride or the groom?" Bobby asked, sidling up to her at the bar where she was ordering a drink. "Both, actually. Jenna and I were roommates in college," and Doris turned, her interest piqued by his easy charm. "I work with Tom. We're pretty tight, could say he's like a brother." Bobby grinned, flashing a set of dimples that Doris found disarmingly cute. They spent the rest of the evening talking as if they had known each other for years, not hours. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, from favorite movies to their shared passion for hiking, then deeper into their aspirations and dreams. "I always wanted a big family," Bobby confessed as they found a quiet bench away from the dance floor. "You know, a house full of kids and chaos." Doris laughed, her hand brushing his arm lightly. "I can totally see that. I've always imagined something similar myself. Guess we're both suckers for a bit of chaos." The night ended with a promise to meet again soon, a promise they both intended to keep. Over the next few months, they were inseparable. Their dates filled with long walks, cozy dinners and hours-long conversations that stretched into the night. Barely 6 months later, Bobby proposed during a hike in the mountains. They reached a scenic overlook, and Bobby, slightly out of breath from the climb and his nerves, got down on one knee. "Doris, I know this might seem fast, but when you know, right? Will you marry me?" Doris, her heart racing with joy, didn't hesitate. Yes. Of course, yes. Their wedding was a whirlwind affair, much like their courtship. Simple yet elegant, it was a true celebration of their love. But as they settled into married life, the excitement of their whirlwind romance gave way to the reality of their shared dream, starting a family. Yet, months turned into a year, and the family they envisioned seemed just out of reach. "You think it's time we saw a doctor?" Doris suggested one evening, her voice tinged with worry. Bobby, ever the optimist, squeezed her hand. "Maybe you're right. Let's do it. Let's find out. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." So they decided. Little did Bobby know, this decision would unravel the life he knew and challenge everything he believed about his past and his future. After weeks of waiting and worrying, the day of the doctor's appointment finally arrived. Bobby and Doris walked hand in hand into the clinic, both trying to mask their nervousness with small talk and forced smiles. "It'll be fine, you'll see. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe we're just, unlucky so far," Bobby said as they sat in the waiting room, his knee bouncing slightly. Doris gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "Yeah, and if there's something up, we'll handle it, right? Together." When Dr. Jensen called them in, Bobby felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The office was bright and sterile, the walls adorned with degrees and cheerful posters about family health. Dr. Jensen, a kindly middle-aged woman with a calm demeanor, gestured for them to sit. "So, what brings you here today, Doctor?" Jensen asked, her voice gentle, encouraging them to open up. Bobby looked at Doris, giving her the lead. "Well, we've been trying to conceive for over a year now, and nothing has happened. We thought it best to get checked, to make sure everything's okay," Doris explained. "All right, that's a good decision. We'll start with a series of tests for both of you. Bobby, we'll need to do a semen analysis among other things. It's routine, nothing to worry about, Doctor," Jensen explained. A week later, Bobby returned alone for the results, feeling a mixture of anticipation and dread. He sat in the same room, this time without Doris's comforting presence. When Dr. Jensen entered, her expression was unreadable. "Bobby, we've got your results back," she began, her voice even. Bobby's heart pounded in his chest. It appears that you have a condition known as a zoospermia, which means there are no sperm in your semen. Bobby felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. No. Sperm, he stammered, struggling to process the words. Yes, I'm afraid so. This condition is a significant factor in male infertility. It can be due to a variety of reasons: genetic, hormonal, or physical blockages. We'll need further testing to determine the cause in your case, doctor. Jensen explained patiently. Bobby nodded, numb. The drive home was a blur. When he arrived, Doris was waiting, her eyes wide and expectant. So, what did they say? She asked, anxiously. Sitting down beside her, Bobby took a deep breath. It's not great, Doris, the doctor said. I can't have kids. I have this thing, a zoospermia. Doris's face fell, and she moved closer, wrapping her arms around him. Oh, Bobby, I'm so sorry, but we'll figure this out, right? There are options, aren't there? Yeah, there are options, Bobby murmured, but his mind was spinning. His thoughts soon drifted to Randy, the son he had always believed was his. How could he have fathered Randy if he was infertile? Seeing his distant look, Doris gently prompted, What's on your mind, Bobby? Talk to me. Bobby looked into her eyes, his own filling with confusion and fear. Randy, if I'm infertile, then how? How could Randy be mine? Doris stiffened slightly, her supportiveness battling her sudden surge of suspicion. What are you saying, Bobby? I don't know, Bobby admitted, shaking his head. I just don't know. The revelation shook the very foundations of his life, casting a shadow over his relationship with his son and forcing him to question what else about his past might be a lie. This uncertainty was the beginning of a much deeper conflict, one that threatened to unravel everything Bobby thought he knew about himself and his family. The drive back from the doctor's office that day was silent. Bobby's mind was a tangled mess of emotions, each thought colliding with the next. He was infertile, a fact that raised unsettling questions about his past, particularly about Randy, the son he had always believed was his own. When they arrived home, Doris started dinner, an attempt to restore some semblance of normalcy, but the air was thick with unspoken fears and suspicions. Bobby sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the wall, lost in his own turmoil. Doris finally broke the silence, her voice gentle yet laced with concern. Bobby, we need to talk about this. What are you thinking? Bobby sighed, his eyes meeting hers. I just don't understand how this is possible. Randy, I've always thought he was mine. It never even crossed my mind that he might not be. The implication hung heavily between them. Doris approached and sat beside him, taking his hand. Bobby, maybe there's been some mistake with the tests, or maybe this is something recent, something that developed. But what if it isn't? What if I've never been able to? Bobby couldn't finish the sentence, the weight of his doubt crushing. Doris squeezed his hand tighter. Then we deal with that. But you need to talk to Danielle. You need answers, Bobby. The thought of confronting his ex-wife about something so deeply personal terrified him. He nodded slowly, knowing Doris was right, but dreading the confrontation that would follow. The next few days were strained. Bobby's mind was constantly on Randy, on the memories of his birth, his first steps, his first day of school, all the moments they had shared. Doubt poisoned these once cherished memories, turning them sour. Doris watched as Bobby withdrew more each day, becoming a shadow of the man she married. She tried to reach out, to pull him back from the edge, but her own fears of what might happen to their marriage, fears of the unknown, kept her from fully bridging the gap. Finally, Bobby made the call to Danielle. He paced back and forth in the living room as it rang, each tone amplifying his anxiety. Danielle answered, her voice bright and unsuspecting. Hey Bobby, what's up? Bobby cleared his throat, his heart pounding. Danielle, we need to talk. It's important. Can I come over? There was a pause, a hint of concern in Danielle's reply. Sure, everything okay? It's about Randy, Bobby said, leaving the sentence hanging ominously. Okay, come by tomorrow morning. We'll talk then, Danielle replied, a note of caution in her voice now. Bobby hung up, feeling no relief, only a growing dread. He looked over at Doris, who had overheard the conversation. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of support and fear. "That's set then. Tomorrow," Bobby said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Doris nodded, her voice soft. "Whatever happens, I'm here. We'll get through this together." But as Bobby lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, he wasn't so sure. The questions about Randy were not just about paternity, they were about trust, about his life's truths, and he feared that the answers might shatter everything he held dear. Bobby's heart thudded painfully against his ribs as he parked outside Danielle's modest townhouse. The familiar surroundings brought back a flood of memories, not all of them pleasant. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversation ahead. He needed answers, and today he was determined to get them. Danielle opened the door, her smile faltering slightly when she saw Bobby's tense expression. "Hey, come on in. You look like you've seen a ghost. What's going on?" Bobby followed her into the living room, where pictures of Randy at various ages decorated the walls, reminders of the life Bobby thought he had lived. He sat down, but his nerves kept him on the edge of the seat. "Danielle, I found out something that really threw me," Bobby began, his voice shaky. "I've been diagnosed with a zoospermia. The doctor said it's likely I've been infertile since birth." Danielle's face paled, her eyes widening in shock. "What? Bobby, are you sure?" He nodded, frustration and hurt bubbling inside him. "Yes, I'm sure. And it's made me question a lot of things. About Randy." Danielle sank back into her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Bobby, I don't know what to say." "I need the truth, Danielle. Is Randy my son? Because biologically it seems impossible." Bobby's voice was firm, more accusatory than he intended. There was a long, painful silence. Danielle looked away, her voice barely a whisper when she finally spoke. "I never wanted to hurt you, Bobby. I thought it was best if things stayed as they were." Bobby felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you saying, Danielle?" Danielle took a deep breath, tears brimming in her eyes. "Randy, he isn't your biological son. I was seeing someone else just before we split. It was a brief thing, but Randy was the result." The room spun around Bobby as her words hit him like physical blows. "You lied to me? For years you let me believe." "I'm so sorry, Bobby. I truly am. You were a wonderful father to him, and I didn't want to take that away from him, or you." Danielle's voice broke with emotion. Bobby stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You didn't want to take it away from me? You didn't think I deserved to know the truth?" His voice rose, anger replacing the shock. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought it would be worse to break up the family," Danielle pleaded, her own anger flaring. "You loved him, Bobby. Wasn't that enough?" "Enough. Knowing the truth is enough. I had a right to know." Randy had a right to know, Bobby was shouting now, unable to control the tumult of emotions. Danielle stood as well, her expression one of desperation. "I was scared, Bobby. I didn't want to lose you, and I didn't want Randy to grow up without a father. You didn't trust me. You didn't respect me enough to be honest." Bobby's voice was cold, hard. "How do you think Randy will feel, knowing his whole life is a lie?" "I don't know, Bobby. I just don't know." Danielle was crying now, her defenses crumbling. Bobby turned toward the door, his mind racing, his heart breaking. "This changes everything, Danielle. I can't even look at you right now." As he stepped outside, the cool air hit his face, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside him. He drove away with one thought echoing in his mind: everything he had known, everything he had loved, was built on a lie. And now he had to figure out what to do next. The drive home from Danielle's felt like the longest of Bobby's life. Every mile was laden with the weight of betrayal and the echoes of Danielle's confession. By the time he pulled into his driveway, night had fallen, casting long shadows that mirrored the darkness swirling inside him. Doris was waiting up, sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her expression anxious. The moment he stepped through the door, she could tell something was profoundly wrong. "Bobby, what happened?" "You look like you've been through hell," Doris said, standing to meet him. Bobby didn't respond at first. He just stood there, letting the door close softly behind him, feeling the finality of it echo through the room. Finally, he looked at her, his eyes hollow. "He isn't my son, Doris, Randy. He's not mine." Doris's hand flew to her mouth, shock etched across her features. "Oh, Bobby. I'm so sorry. What did Danielle say?" He shook his head, the anger and hurt battling for dominance. She knew all along and never told me. She thought she was protecting us, keeping the family together by lying to me. Doris moved closer, reaching out to him, but Bobby stepped back, the need for space pressing in on him. "She took away my choice, Doris. She took away my right to know my own life." "I can't even imagine how you must feel," Doris said softly, her own heart aching for him. "What are you going to do about Randy?" "That's just it. I don't know. How do I face him? How do I even begin to deal with this?" Bobby's voice was ragged, the pain clear. Doris tried to offer comfort, her voice gentle. "Maybe you need some time, just a little time to process all this before you decide anything. Randy loves you, Bobby. He's always seen you as his dad." "But that's just it, isn't it? I was his dad in every way, but the truth." Bobby's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. "The truth changes everything." Doris moved to sit down, patting the couch next to her. "Sit with me, please. Let's just sit for a while." Bobby complied, sinking down next to her, feeling the weight of his world collapsing around him. They sat in silence, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. After a long pause, Bobby spoke again, his voice low. "I've been a father to him for years. What does it even mean now? Was it all just a role I was playing without knowing the script?" Doris turned to him, her eyes filled with empathy. "It means you loved him. You raised him. That's what matters, Bobby. That's what makes you a father, not just biology." Bobby considered her words, the bitterness slowly ebbing. "I just feel so lost, Doris. I don't know if I can look at him the same way. And what if he can't look at me the same way either?" Doris squeezed his hand, a silent pledge of support. "Whatever happens, you won't be alone in this. I'm here, Bobby. We'll figure this out together." The conversation stretched into the night with no easy answers. Bobby wrestled with his feelings of betrayal, loss, and love. The path forward was unclear, but Doris's steady presence reminded him that even in the darkest moments, he wasn't alone. Over the following weeks, Bobby's internal struggle cast a shadow over every aspect of his life. He went through the motions going to work, coming home, sitting through dinners in silence. The vibrant man Doris had fallen in love with seemed to have retreated into a shell, replaced by a ghost of his former self. One evening, Doris found him staring out the window, his dinner untouched. The atmosphere in the house had grown increasingly tense, each day heavier than the last. She approached him slowly, her voice soft but carrying a weight of its own. "Bobby, we need to talk. You've been so distant, and I don't know how to help anymore." Bobby didn't turn around. His voice was flat, drained of emotion. "I'm not sure there's anything you can do, Doris. I'm sorry I've been like this. I can't get past it." Doris took a deep breath, the air thick with unspoken fears. "I miss us, Bobby. I miss the laughter, the talks, the plans. I miss you. But I feel like I'm living with a stranger now." He finally turned to face her, his eyes tired and sad. "I know, and I hate that it's affecting us, but I don't know how to be anyone else right now. I'm lost, Doris. There has to be more than just waiting for things to get better. We need to find a way forward." Or Doris trailed off, the next words catching in her throat. Or what? Bobby's voice was gentle, almost resigned. "Or maybe it's time for a change. Maybe we need some space." The words were out before Doris could stop them, each one landing like a blow. Bobby looked stunned, then nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need some space to sort myself out. I just never thought it would come to this." The conversation paused as both grappled with the implications of what was being suggested. Doris finally spoke, her voice trembling. "I think I need to go stay with my sister for a while, just to think things through." Bobby felt a pang in his chest but managed a small nod. "Okay, I understand. I don't want to hold you back." Packing her bags felt surreal to Doris. Each item she placed inside was a tangible confirmation of the distance growing between them. When she zipped the suitcase, she felt as though she was sealing away the life they had shared. Standing at the door with her suitcase in hand, Doris turned to Bobby. "I really hope you find what you need, Bobby. And no matter what happens, I truly wish you find your way back to happiness." Bobby swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks, Doris. I hope you find some peace too. Maybe this isn't goodbye. Maybe it's just until we find better versions of ourselves." With a final, lingering look, Doris stepped out the door. Bobby watched her drive away, feeling a mixture of relief and profound sadness. The silence that settled over the house after her departure was deafening, but within it lay a space for reflection, a chance to confront the grief and betrayal that had been consuming him. As the days turned into weeks, the solitude forced Bobby to face his demons, to wrestle with the loss of his marriage and the uncertainty about his relationship with Randy. Each day was a battle, but slowly clarity began to emerge from the chaos of his emotions. Months of solitude gave Bobby time to reflect on the chaos that had upended his life. He had spent countless hours pacing the same floors that once echoed with laughter and warmth, now just a silent testament to his isolation. One particularly cold evening, Bobby sat down at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, and thought about Randy. He missed the boy, his boy, no matter what the truth said. The bond they shared had been real to him, and he wondered if there was any way to salvage it. Picking up his phone, Bobby dialed Randy's number. He had rehearsed what he might say 100 times, but as the phone rang, every prepared word slipped away. "Hello." Randy's voice was cautious, laced with a confusion that made Bobby's heart sink. "Hey, Randy, it's me." "It's Bobby." Bobby's voice was thick with emotion, his usual confidence replaced by hesitancy. There was a pause on the line, long enough to make Bobby's hand tremble slightly. "Hi, Bobby. What's up?" Randy's tone was guarded, unsure. Bobby took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that's happened. I miss you, Randy. I miss having you around." "I miss you too. But it's been weird, you know." After everything Mum said, Randy trailed off, the hurt evident in his voice. Bobby nodded, even though Randy couldn't see it. "I know it's been hard. And I'm sorry for how things turned out. I never wanted to hurt you." Randy sighed, his voice softening a bit. "I know, Bobby. It's just everything's different now. I understand that, but I want to try and make things right, if we can. I'd like to see you maybe catch a game together like old times." Just talk. Bobby's offer hung in the air, fragile and fraught with potential rejection. There was a lengthy silence, during which Bobby's heart raced. Finally, Randy spoke. "I'd like that. But it's going to take some time, you know, to get back to how things were. Of course, I don't expect everything to be the same. But I'd like to start somewhere. You're important to me, Randy. You'll always be my son," no matter what. Bobby's words were earnest, filled with a hope he hadn't felt in months. "Okay, let's start slow. Maybe meet up this weekend." Randy's voice was cautious but carried a hint of warmth that gave Bobby a sliver of hope. "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that. I'll pick you up, and we'll go from there." Bobby felt a weight lift slightly off his shoulders, the prospect of reconciliation, however slight, igniting a spark of optimism. "Okay, see you Saturday, Bobby." "See you Saturday, Randy." As he hung up the phone, Bobby felt a mix of relief and anxiety. He knew that rebuilding the trust and closeness they once shared would be a journey, perhaps a long one. But the first step had been taken, and for the first time in a long while, Bobby felt that maybe, just maybe, things could start to heal. Saturday arrived, and with it, a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy for Bobby. He hadn't seen Randy in months, and as he drove to pick him up, He practiced the conversation in his head, each word carefully weighed for impact and kindness. When Randy climbed into the passenger seat, the initial awkwardness was palpable. Bobby could sense the hesitance in Randy's movements, the careful way he buckled his seatbelt, avoiding eye contact. "Hey, Randy. Thanks for agreeing to meet up today," Bobby started, keeping his tone light as he pulled away from the curb. Randy nodded, his gaze fixed on the passing scenery. "Yeah, sure. What's the plan?" "I thought we could grab some lunch and maybe hit the batting cages after." Like old times, Bobby suggested, hoping to spark some of the old enthusiasm. Randy's response was a small smile, the first genuine one Bobby had seen that day. "Sounds good." The lunch was a slow thawing of the ice between them. Conversation initially revolved around safe topics like sports and school, but gradually, as the meal progressed, they ventured into more personal territory. "So, how have you been?" really, Bobby asked, his voice tinged with concern. Randy hesitated, then sighed. "It's been weird." Mom explained everything. About you, about the situation. It was a lot to take in. Bobby nodded solemnly. "I can only imagine. I'm sorry you had to go through all that. I never wanted any of this to hurt you." "I know, Bobby. I do. And I've been thinking. About us. About everything. I've missed you. It's been hard not having you around." Randy's admission was quiet, almost reluctant, but sincere. Bobby felt a warmth spread through him, a sign of the barriers breaking down. "I've missed you too, more than you can imagine. Randy, I want to be there for you, no matter what. I still want to be a part of your life if you'll let me." Randy finally turned to look at him directly, his expression softening. "I'd like that. I think I'd really like that." The conversation opened the door to more heartfelt discussions, each sharing their feelings about the past few months. It was not an immediate return to how things were, but it was a starter foundation they could both build upon. After lunch, the batting cages were a hit, literally and metaphorically. The activity brought back a semblance of the old camaraderie, the ease of their relationship slowly resurfacing as they laughed and competed playfully. As Bobby drove Randy home later that afternoon, he felt a sense of accomplishment and hope. "Today was great, Randy. I hope we can keep this going." Randy smiled, more openly now. "Yeah, me too. Let's not let it go so long next time." "Agreed," Bobby said, relief and happiness evident in his voice. "I'm here whenever you need me. We'll take it one step at a time." "Thanks, Bobby. For everything today. It means a lot," Randy said as he got out of the car. As Bobby drove home, the setting sun cast a warm glow through his windshield, reflecting his renewed spirits. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but today had been a significant step in the right direction. Bobby realized that rebirth wasn't just about healing, it was about embracing the changes and making the most of the second chances. He was ready for whatever came next, fortified by the regained connection with Randy and a deeper understanding of himself. Months had passed since Bobby and Randy started rebuilding their relationship, and with each outing, each shared moment, the bond they forged became stronger, more resilient. Bobby learned to navigate his new reality with a sense of purpose and acceptance that he had struggled to find before. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Bobby sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, Doris came to visit. She had been living on her own, giving both of them the space they needed. As she stepped onto the porch, Bobby noticed the slight apprehension in her step, a remnant of their time apart. "Hey, Doris. It's good to see you," Bobby greeted her warmly, standing to give her a brief, albeit heartfelt hug. "Hi, Bobby. It's good to see you too. You look happy," Doris noted, taking a seat beside him. Bobby smiled, a genuine, contented smile. "I am, in a way I haven't been for a long time. It's been a journey, but I'm getting there." Doris nodded, sipping the coffee Bobby had handed her. "I can see that. And how's Randy?" "He's doing great. We've found a new rhythm, you know. It's different but good. He's growing up so fast, and I'm just glad I can be there for him, in whatever way he needs." "That's wonderful to hear, Bobby. Really. And how about you? How have you been handling everything else? Bobby took a deep breath, considering her question. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us, about me. I've been seeing a counselor, trying to work through the anger and betrayal. It's helped, talking to someone neutral. It's made me realize a lot about forgiveness and moving forward. Doris listened, her expression thoughtful. I'm glad, Bobby. You deserve to find some peace after everything that happened. There was a pause, a comfortable silence, before Bobby continued. Doris, I wanted to thank you for pushing me to seek help, for being there before. Before everything changed, I wouldn't have made it this far without that push. Doris smiled softly. I just wanted what was best for you, Bobby. I always have. I'm just happy to see that you're finding your way. As they sat in silence, watching the leaves fall in the gentle breeze, Bobby felt a profound sense of gratitude. Doris, whatever happens next, I hope we can be in each other's lives, even if it's not the way it was before. You're important to me. Doris reached out, her hand covering his. I'd like that, Bobby. And who knows? Maybe this is just a new beginning, a different kind of chapter for both of us. Bobby nodded, his heart lighter than it had been in years. A new beginning. I like the sound of that. As the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the porch, Bobby felt a sense of closure and a new path opening before him. The challenges of the past had taught him about resilience, about the capacity of the human heart to heal and to forgive. He was ready now, more than ever, to embrace the future, whatever it might bring. With renewed relationships and a deeper understanding of himself, Bobby was stepping into a new dawn, hopeful and renewed. Write in the comments how you liked the story. And we continue. Second story. The first light of dawn spilled through the sheer curtains, casting a soft glow across the bedroom. Vincent, already half awake, listened for the familiar sounds that marked the beginning of another day. Beside him, Natalie stirred, her breath still deep in sleep. Hey. Love, Vincent whispered, nudging her gently. His hand brushed a strand of hair from her face. Natalie's eyes fluttered open, a sleepy smile spreading across her lips. Morning, she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. Morning, Vincent replied, his voice a soft rumble. I bet the sun envies how brightly you shine even when you just wake up. Laughing softly, Natalie playfully pushed him away. Stop it, you'll make me blush. But let me get up first. I need to start breakfast before you spoil me with your sweet nothings. Vincent watched as she slid out of bed, admiring her graceful movements. The warmth of their small, cozy kitchen soon drifted into the room, mingled with the scent of brewing coffee and toasting bread. It was their ritual, one that had grown over 2 decades into a silent language of love and care. You know, Vincent called out, propping himself up on his elbows, you don't always have to cook. We could grab something on the way out. Natalie peeked from the kitchen, a spatula in hand, and miss out on our morning talks. Never, she chuckled. Besides, today I'm making your favorite French toast and bacon. How could we skip that? Vincent grinned, swinging his legs off the bed. You spoil me rotten, Natalie. What would I do without you? You'd probably eat cereal every day, she joked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. As he walked into the kitchen, Vincent wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. The normalcy of the moment filled him with a deep, comforting warmth. I just might. But then I'd miss this, the best part of my day. Natalie leaned back into him, placing her hands over his. And I'd miss hearing that. You're my best part too. They swayed slightly in their embrace, a wordless dance they had perfected over the years. It was these mornings, these quiet exchanges of love and laughter, that stitched the patches of their life together into a quilt of shared experiences. As Natalie turned to face him, her expression softened. Vincent, have you thought more about what we talked about? Adoption, maybe. Vincent's face grew serious, the joy of the morning dimming slightly. He took a deep breath, his hands tightening around hers. I have. every day. But Nat, you're the only one I want to share these mornings with. Kids or no kids, you're my family. Natalie nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I love you so much for that. I just wish I could give you more. You've given me everything, Vincent assured her, brushing a kiss on her forehead. Let's not think about anything else today. Let's just enjoy our breakfast. And so, as the sun rose higher, casting light across their kitchen table, they sat down to eat. Between bites of French toast and sips of coffee, their laughter filled the room, pushing away any shadows of doubt or sadness, at least for the moment. The evening had settled comfortably around Vincent and Natalie's small living room, with soft music playing in the background and 2 cups of steaming tea resting on the coffee table. They were nestled on the sofa, feet tucked under, each lost in a book. It was a serene, almost perfect silence, but beneath it, a weighty conversation loomed. Natalie put her book down first, her fingers drumming lightly on the cover. She glanced over at Vincent, who seemed absorbed in his reading. Gathering her courage, she finally broke the silence. Vincent. Vincent looked up, marking his page with a finger. Yeah, love. I've been thinking, Natalie began, her voice trembling slightly with the gravity of her thoughts. About us. About our future. Vincent set his book aside, his full attention now on her. What about it? It's about children, she hesitated, searching his face for any sign of discomfort. We've tried everything, Vince. Maybe it's time we considered other options. Vincent's expression softened. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. What kind of options? Natalie took a deep breath. Well, we could look into adoption. There are so many children out there who could use a loving home. Or... Her voice faltered, and she had to force herself to continue. Or maybe we should think about. Perhaps it's best if you find someone who can give you what I can't. Vincent's brow furrowed deeply at her words. Natalie, stop. You're my wife. I married you for you, not just for the possibility of kids. But Vincent, I know how much you want to be a dad. And after all the treatments, all the doctors, I can't bear the thought of you giving up that dream because of me. Vincent moved closer, cradling her face in his hands. Listen to me, Natalie. My dream isn't to just be a dad. It's to build a life with you. You are my family, kids or no kids. I don't want to hear talk of splitting up again. All right. Tears brimmed in Natalie's eyes as she nodded, leaning into his touch. I just want you to be happy, Vincent. I am happy, Nat. I'm happiest with you, he smiled warmly, wiping away a tear that escaped down her cheek. And if you think adoption could make our family complete, then let's explore that. Together. That's what matters to me, doing this together. Natalie's face lit up with a cautious hope. Really? You'd consider that? Absolutely, Vincent affirmed, his voice resolute. Let's start looking into it. Let's find out everything we need to do. If it brings a child into our home, into our life, then I'm all for it. The mood lightened as Natalie laughed through her tears, the burden of her worries lifting slightly. Thank you, Vincent, for being you. Always, Nat. And hey, Vincent added with a playful wink, I bet I'd make a pretty cool dad, huh? You'd be the best, Natalie agreed, laughing. They spent the rest of the evening talking excitedly about the future, the possibilities of adoption filling the room with new dreams and aspirations. It was a night of renewed hope, where the foundation of their love proved strong enough to carry them forward, no matter the path they chose. The season shifted subtly into a crisp autumn, but inside Vincent and Natalie's home, a much harsher change loomed. Natalie had been feeling under the weather for weeks, her usual vibrant self fading into long naps and quiet evenings. She tried to dismiss it as a seasonal flu, but when she started losing weight rapidly, even the warmth of their hopeful discussions about adoption couldn't mask the growing concern. One chilly evening, as they were cleaning up after a light dinner, Natalie paused, leaning heavily against the counter. Vincent, drying a plate, noticed immediately. Hey, you okay? He asked, setting the plate down. Natalie tried to muster a smile but failed. I just feel so tired, Vin. It's like no matter how much I sleep, it's never enough. Vincent frowned, his hands automatically finding hers. Maybe it's time to see the doctor, Nat. This has been going on for too long. Natalie sighed, the worry evident in her eyes. I know. I'm scared, Vincent. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. First thing tomorrow, we're making an appointment. True to his word, Vincent sat beside Natalie in the doctor's office the next day, holding her hand tightly as they waited for the test results. The doctor's face was grave when he finally entered the room, the documents in his hand foretelling nothing good. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, the doctor began, his voice steady but kind. The tests have come back, and they indicate that you have an advanced form of pancreatic cancer. It's aggressive and, unfortunately, has progressed too far for surgery. The room spun around Vincent as he tried to process the words. But what can we do, he stammered, his voice a whisper of desperation. The doctor shook his head slightly. At this stage, our focus will be on making Natalie as comfortable as possible. There are treatments available to help with the symptoms, but they won't cure the disease. Natalie, pale and silent up to this point, finally spoke, her voice cracking. How long? It's difficult to say exactly, the doctor replied gently. Possibly a few months. I'm very sorry. The drive home was silent, the weight of the prognosis crushing them both. Once home, Natalie went straight to their bedroom, lying down without changing. Vincent followed after a moment, sitting on the edge of the bed, taking her hand in his. Natalie, talk to me, he pleaded softly. Natalie turned to face him, her eyes brimming with tears. I'm so sorry, Vincent. I'm sorry I can't grow old with you, that we won't get to see where that adoption journey could have taken us. Vincent's own tears fell freely now as he pulled her into an embrace. None of that matters, Nat. I don't care about any of that. I just want you here with me, for as long as I can have you. They held each other into the night, the reality of their limited time together settling around them like a thick fog. Vincent stroked her hair, whispering reassurances he barely felt, knowing that the coming storm would test every ounce of strength they had. But in that moment, all he could do was hold her, their silent sobs a heartbreaking melody to the cruel twist of fate they faced. The months following Natalie's diagnosis were a blur of hospital visits, quiet moments, and whispered conversations. The vibrant life they once shared narrowed into a routine dominated by medications and doctor's appointments. Vincent devoted himself entirely to Natalie's care, his own grief and fear simmering beneath a calm exterior. But as the winter approached, Natalie's condition worsened significantly, leaving her mostly bedridden and diminishing her once bright spirit. One evening, as Vincent sat beside Natalie's bed, watching her sleep restlessly, he leafed through an old photo album, a reminder of better days. The room was quiet except for the soft sound of Natalie's breathing and the occasional crackle from the fire Vincent had kindled in the hearth. Natalie's eyes fluttered open, and she turned her head slightly to look at Vincent. Her voice was weak but filled with warmth. What are you looking at? Just our photos, Vincent replied, managing a small smile as he showed her a picture from their honeymoon. Remember this? White sands, blue seas, and you were terrified of the water. Natalie chuckled softly, the sound frail but genuine. I was not terrified. I was. Respectfully cautious. Vincent laughed, and for a brief moment, the heavy shadow of her illness lifted. That's one way to put it. The laughter faded, and Natalie's gaze turned serious. Vincent, I've been thinking. About the adoption. His brow furrowed, surprised she was bringing it up now. Nat, you don't have to worry about that now. Let's just focus on. No, I need to say this, she interrupted gently. I know I won't be here to see it, but I want you to promise me something. Vincent set the album aside, taking her hand, his voice thick with emotion. Anything, Natalie. Promise me you'll go through with the adoption, she said firmly. Find a child who needs a home, someone to give all this love to. Don't let my leaving stop you from being the incredible father I know you can be. Vincent's eyes filled with tears, the pain of imagining a future without her sharp and overwhelming. I don't know if I can do it alone, Nat. You won't be alone, she whispered. I'll be there in your heart, just a memory away. Promise me, Vincent. After a long pause, Vincent nodded, the promise a heavy weight but also a beacon. I promise, Natalie. I'll do it. She squeezed his hand, her smile sad but grateful. Thank you. That means everything to me. As the fire dwindled to embers, they continued to talk softly about their hopes and dreams for this unknown child, weaving a future from the threads of their shared past. Despite the sorrow of their present, this conversation about adoption brought a faint light of hope to Vincent, a reminder of life beyond the imminent darkness. In the weeks that followed, as Natalie's health declined to whispers and stillness, Vincent held on to the promise he made. When she finally passed, peacefully in her sleep one snowy morning, Vincent felt a heartbreak unlike any other, but also a resolve to fulfill his vow to her, to honor her last wish. It was this resolve that led him, some months later, to the doors of an adoption agency, his heart heavy but determined to bring light back into his home. After months of paperwork and preparation, the day had finally arrived. Vincent sat nervously in the bland, overly air-conditioned waiting room of the adoption agency, clutching a small photo album filled with pictures of his home, his life with Natalie, and the spaces he hoped would soon be filled by the laughter of a child. Today he would meet Albert, the 11-year-old boy he might soon call son. The social worker, Ms. Jennings, appeared in the doorway, her smile reassuring. Mr. Harris, we're ready for you. Albert is in the playroom. Vincent stood, his hands trembling slightly. Thank you, Ms. Jennings. I'm ready. He followed her down the hallway to a brightly lit room where a boy with tousled brown hair was sitting at a small table, absorbed in assembling a complex Lego set. Albert looked up, his expression curious and guarded. Albert, this is Mr. Vincent Harris Ms. Jennings introduced. Vincent, this is Albert. Hi, Albert, Vincent said, offering a gentle, somewhat awkward smile. Nice to meet you. Hi, Albert replied quietly, his attention briefly flicking back to his Legos before meeting Vincent's gaze again. Ms. Jennings excused herself, leaving them to get acquainted. Vincent sat down across from Albert, watching him for a moment. I hear you're quite the Lego master, he said, trying to break the ice. Albert shrugged, a small smile flickering. I like building things. It's fun figuring it all out. That's great, Vincent replied, encouraged by the smile. I like building things too. Maybe we could build something together sometime. Like what, Albert asked, interest peeking through his initial reserve. Maybe a birdhouse? We could put it in the backyard. There are a lot of birds around my house, Vincent suggested. Albert looked thoughtful. I'd like that. I've never built a real birdhouse before. Their conversation slowly picked up from there, moving on to Albert's favourite subjects at school, his favourite movies, and what he liked to do in his free time. Vincent shared a little about his life, his work as a graphic designer, and stories about Natalie, always mindful of how much he revealed. As the meeting drew to a close, Vincent felt a connection starting to form, a bond fragile yet promising. He stood, reluctant to leave. I had a good time today, Albert. I hope we can meet again soon. Albert nodded, his demeanour more open than before. Me too. Vincent left the agency with a mix of emotions swirling in his heart: hope, fear, excitement. Over the next few weeks, he met with Albert several more times, each visit strengthening the bond between them. They talked about everything from superheroes to school projects, each conversation easing Albert further out of his shell. Finally, the day came when Ms. Jennings called Vincent with the news he had been hoping for. Vincent, the committee has reviewed your case, and we're pleased to move forward with the adoption. If you're still sure about this, we can start the paperwork to bring Albert into your home. Vincent felt a surge of emotion. Yes, I'm sure. Thank you, Ms. Jennings. Congratulations, Vincent. You and Albert are about to start a wonderful new chapter together. Hanging up the phone, Vincent looked around the home he had shared with Natalie, feeling her absence deeply yet also feeling her presence in his decision to move forward. He picked up the small Lego birdhouse they had started during one of their visits, an emblem of their new beginning. "I promise. Natalie," he whispered to the quiet room. "I'll give him a good life. We're going to be okay." A few years had passed since Albert moved in with Vincent, and their life together had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Albert, now a teenager, was thriving under Vincent's care, showing a keen interest in arts, much like Vincent himself. The house, once quiet and somber, was now filled with the sounds of laughter, music, and the occasional debate over which movie to watch on a Friday night. It was during one of these lively evenings that Albert shared some big news. "Vincent," he began hesitantly during dinner, "I've been meaning to tell you something." Vincent looked up from his plate, noting the seriousness in Albert's tone. "What's up, Al?" "Well, Kayla and we're expecting a baby." Vincent's fork paused mid-air. "Really? That's wonderful news." His voice was enthusiastic, but a trace of surprise lingered. "You're going to be a dad?" "Yeah, I'm still wrapping my head around it, but I'm excited," Albert admitted, his smile a mix of nervousness and pride. "And scared." "You'll be a great father," Vincent reassured him warmly, "just like you've been a great son." The months flew by, and soon Kayla gave birth to a beautiful baby boy they named Theo. However, happiness was tinged with confusion when Vincent first met his new grandson. Theo's features seemed unusually distinct from either Albert or Kayla, sparking whispered concerns among family and friends. During one of their regular visits, Vincent addressed the elephant in the room. While Kayla was resting and Albert was making coffee, Vincent gently brought up the subject. "Albert, can we talk about something a bit sensitive?" Albert looked up, his expression tensing. "Sure, what is it?" "It's about Theo," Vincent began cautiously. "He's a beautiful boy, but I've noticed, and others have too, that he doesn't quite look like either of you." Albert's face hardened slightly. "I know what you're getting at, Vincent. You think Kayla cheated on me." No, I didn't say that," Vincent hurried to clarify. "It's just unusual, is all. Genetic traits can be surprising sometimes. I mean, you know nothing about your biological father, so who knows what genes are at play?" Albert nodded, his expression softening. "I get it, but it's a bit unsettling. I guess part of me wonders too. Kayla and I have been under a lot of stress, and things haven't been easy. Have you thought about a paternity test, just to put any doubts to rest, for all of you?" Vincent suggested delicately. Albert sighed, rubbing his neck. "Yeah, I've thought about it. Maybe it's a good idea. I don't want any uncertainties hanging over our family." When Kayla joined them, looking refreshed and cheerful, the atmosphere shifted slightly. Vincent noticed how tenderly Albert interacted with her and Theo, despite the underlying tensions. Weeks later, Albert took the step to conduct a DNA test, the results of which would prove to be more shocking than anyone had anticipated. As they awaited the results, Vincent supported Albert, reminding him that no matter what the outcome, the bond they shared was about more than just blood. It was about love, trust, and the life they built together as a family. The days leading up to the results of the DNA test were tense and quiet in Vincent's household. Albert had become withdrawn, his usual upbeat demeanor shadowed by the looming uncertainty. Vincent did his best to keep the atmosphere light, but the anxiety was palpable. Finally, the day arrived when Albert received the envelope containing the test results. He sat at the kitchen table, the unopened envelope before him, as Vincent poured them both a cup of coffee. "You want me to be here when you open it?" Vincent asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil he felt inside. Albert nodded, his hands visibly shaking. "Yeah, I'd appreciate that." Vincent sat down across from him, offering a supportive smile. "Whatever it says, Al, we'll handle it together." Taking a deep breath, Albert tore open the envelope and slowly pulled out the papers. His eyes scanned the contents quickly at first, then more carefully as his brow furrowed. "Well," Vincent prompted gently after a moment of silence. "It says," Albert started, his voice cracking slightly, It says I'm not Theo's biological father." The words hung heavy in the air. Vincent felt a pang of heartache for Albert, seeing the young man struggle to process the news. "What are you going to do?" Vincent asked softly. Albert shook his head, a mix of anger and confusion clouding his features. "I don't know, Vincent. I love Theo, he's my son no matter what this says. But this feels like a betrayal." Vincent reached across the table, placing his hand over Albert's. "And Kayla? Have you talked to her about this?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure before I accused her of anything." Albert looked up, his eyes searching Vincent's. "How do I even bring this up? How do we get past this?" "It won't be easy," Vincent admitted. "But you need to talk to her, Albert. Keeping this inside won't help either of you. And you both need to figure out where to go from here, for Theo's sake." Albert nodded slowly, the resolve setting in. "You're right. I'll talk to her tonight." Vincent squeezed his hand reassuringly. "Good man. And whatever support you need, I'm here for you." That evening, when Kayla came home, Albert sat her down in the living room. Vincent gave them privacy but stayed close, his presence a silent pillar of support. Albert's voice was low but firm as he started. "Kayla, there's something we need to talk about. It's about Theo." Kayla looked concerned, her voice soft. "What about him, Al?" "I did a DNA test," Albert confessed, watching her reaction closely. Kayla's face paled, her eyes widening in shock. "Why would you do that?" "Because I needed to know. And the results, they show that I'm not Theo's biological father." His voice was strained, trying to control the emotion. Tears filled Kayla's eyes, and she covered her face with her hands. After a moment, she looked up at him, her expression one of deep regret. "I'm so sorry, Albert. It was a mistake, one I regret every day. It happened during a rough patch we were going through, and I never thought." Albert was silent for a long time, the hurt visible in his eyes. Finally, he spoke. "I need some time to think about all this." As Kayla nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, Albert stood up and walked out, heading towards Vincent, who was waiting in the kitchen. Vincent looked up as Albert approached, his expression one of deep concern. "How did it go?" "I don't know yet," Albert admitted, his voice weary. "It's a lot to process." Vincent stood and embraced him, his own eyes misty. "Take all the time you need. We'll figure this out, one step at a time." In the days that followed, the household was submerged in a thick silence, each member grappling with their own swirl of emotions as they navigated this unexpected and painful chapter. The days following the revelation were some of the hardest Albert and Kayla had ever faced. The air between them was thick with tension and unspoken words, each day stretching long and arduous. Vincent watched with a heavy heart, providing support but feeling the limits of his ability to heal their wounds. After a few days of reflection, Albert decided it was time to clear the air. He invited Kayla to join him for a walk in the nearby park, a place that had always been a sanctuary for them during happier times. The autumn leaves provided a colourful backdrop to their somber conversation. As they walked down the familiar paths, Albert broke the silence. "Kayla, we can't keep avoiding this. We need to talk about everything. About Theo, about us." Kayla nodded, clutching her jacket against the chill. "I know. I'm so sorry, Albert. I never wanted to hurt you like this." "I believe you," Albert replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "But knowing doesn't make it hurt any less. I've been thinking a lot. About what I want, what's best for Theo, and how I feel about you." "And what have you decided?" Kayla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Albert took a deep breath, looking out over the pond they'd paused beside. "I love Theo. He's my son, no matter what a test says. And I love you, Kayla. We've been through so much together. I don't want to throw that away because of a mistake." Tears welled up in Kayla's eyes as she reached for his hand. "Really? Can you forgive me, Albert? Can we really start over?" "It won't be easy," Albert said, squeezing her hand. "It's going to take time, and we're going to need help. We should probably see a counselor, work through this with someone who can guide us. I'd like that, Kayla said, a note of hope in her voice. I want to make things right, Albert, whatever it takes. They spent a long time at the park, talking openly about their feelings, their fears, and their hopes for the future. It was the beginning of a long journey towards healing and rebuilding their relationship. Back at home, Albert shared his decision with Vincent, who listened with a relieved smile. I'm proud of you, Albert. It takes a lot of courage to forgive and work through something like this. Albert nodded, feeling a weight lifting from his shoulders. Thanks, Vincent. I couldn't have gotten to this point without you. Vincent clasped his shoulder warmly. That's what family is for. And remember, I'm here, every step of the way. The following months were filled with ups and downs for Albert and Kayla, but they remained committed to rebuilding their trust and nurturing their family. Therapy sessions became a regular part of their routine, and slowly, the warmth returned to their home. Vincent watched as Theo grew, the little boy blissfully unaware of the turmoil of his early months. Seeing Albert and Kayla smiling together, watching a movie with Theo curled up between them, Vincent felt a profound sense of peace. One evening, as they all sat together in the living room, Albert turned to Vincent. You know, Vincent, what happened? It taught me a lot about what family really means. It's not just about blood. It's about choosing to love, choosing to stick together through everything. Vincent nodded, his eyes bright. Exactly, Albert. And look at us now, stronger than ever. As they all leaned back, enjoying the quiet companionship, Vincent felt Natalie's absence but knew she would have been proud of the family they had become. Through forgiveness and acceptance, they had found a way forward, their bonds not just intact but stronger for having been tested. Years passed, and the landscape of Vincent's life continued to evolve with the graceful passage of time. Theo grew into a curious and energetic child, his laughter a constant echo in the home that Vincent had built on love and resilience. Albert and Kayla, having worked through their challenges, fostered a strong, loving relationship that was the backbone of their family's happiness. On a crisp autumn afternoon, the family gathered in the backyard for a celebration. Theo's 7th birthday was a joyful affair, with balloons, cake, and a gaggle of excited children running around. Vincent watched from the sidelines, a content smile playing on his lips as he observed the life he had helped shape. Albert approached him, handing him a plate with a slice of birthday cake. You look like you're miles away, Albert joked, nudging Vincent playfully. Vincent chuckled, accepting the cake. Just thinking about how far we've come, Al. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? It really has, Albert agreed, his gaze wandering over to where Kayla was helping Theo unwrap a present. I can't believe he's already 7. Feels like just yesterday we were figuring out how to be parents. And you've done a fantastic job, Vincent said warmly. You both have. Albert smiled. Then his expression turned reflective. You know, I've been thinking a lot lately about what you said years ago. About family not just being about blood, but about the choices we make. I want Theo to understand that, to grow up knowing that he's loved unconditionally. He will, Vincent assured him. He's surrounded by love here, and that's what matters most. You and Kayla have created a beautiful life for him. As the afternoon sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn, Vincent gathered everyone around for a toast. Holding up his glass, he caught the attention of his family and friends. I want to say a few words, Vincent began, his voice carrying over the chatter. We're here today to celebrate Theo, but I also want to celebrate each and every one of you. This family, our home, it's built on more than just shared DNA. It's built on shared dreams, challenges, and above all, shared love. Everyone raised their glasses, echoing Vincent's sentiment. To family they chorused, the word resonant with meaning. After the toast, Kayla leaned over to Vincent, her eyes bright with gratitude. Thank you, Vincent, for everything, for being our rock, our guide, for showing us the way when we felt lost. Vincent hugged her gently. You never need to thank me, Kayla. This is what families do. We hold each other up. As the party wound down and the guests began to depart, Vincent took one last look around the yard, his heart full. He thought of Natalie, of the promises made and kept, and of the unexpected paths his life had taken. He knew that somewhere, Natalie was smiling down on them, her legacy one of love, endurance, and forgiveness. Walking back into the house, Vincent felt a deep, unshakable peace. He had seen his family through the darkest of times into the light of these happy days. And as he closed the door behind him, he knew that whatever paths they chose to walk in the future, they would walk them together. Write in the comments how you liked the story. And we continue. Third story. The morning was bright and full of that crisp autumn air that Kayla loved so much. Today was their anniversary, and the house was already buzzing with the subtle chaos of preparation. Daniel was in the living room, the sound of cartoons barely covering his giggles. Kayla was in the kitchen, tying up some loose ends for the party later, when she saw an envelope on the counter, sticking out like a sore thumb among the grocery lists and unpaid bills. It was sealed, with her name scribbled across the front in Russell's neat, tight handwriting for Kayla, with urgency. Her hands shook slightly as she picked it up. The weight of it felt heavy, laden with significance. Or maybe it was just her heart, heavy with a mixture of dread and anticipation. She tore it open, and her eyes quickly scanned the contents. It was the DNA test results. Her breath caught. This was supposed to fix things, she thought. "Mummy." Look, Daniel's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. He was holding up a crayon drawing of a cat that looked more like a purple blob. "That's amazing, sweetie," she managed, her voice a tightrope of normalcy. Daniel beamed and scampered back to his crayons. Russell walked in just then, his presence filling up the doorway. He glanced at the open envelope in her hands and his face darkened. "What's that?" he asked, though it was clear he knew. "It's the DNA test results," Kayla replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She held the papers out to him, an offering, a plea. Russell snatched the results from her hands, his eyes quickly darting down to read. "Why would you do this without telling me?" His voice was low, charged with an emotion she couldn't quite place. We talked about this, Russ. The jokes, the comments at family gatherings. I thought." "You thought what?" "That I wasn't Daniel's father," Russell interrupted, his tone harsher now. His eyes, usually so warm, were cold and distant. "No, I just wanted to stop the whispers, to give us peace." "Peace," Russell scoffed, tossing the papers on the counter. "Did you ever consider talking to me first? Or was I just another part of the problem for you?" Kayla's heart pounded, her mind racing for the right words. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought you'd understand." Understand? Russell's laugh was bitter. "I don't understand this, Kayla. I don't understand any of it." Kayla reached out, touching his arm. "Russ, please." But he pulled away, stepping back as if her touch burned. "I need to think," he muttered, already heading toward the door to their backyard, leaving Kayla alone with the open envelope and a room suddenly too quiet except for the innocent laughter of their son. As the door slammed shut, Kayla's resolve crumbled. She sank into a kitchen chair, her mind a whirlwind of regret and confusion. "What have I done?" She looked towards where Daniel sat, blissfully unaware, and her resolve hardened. "This is for our family," she thought, even as a tear slipped down her cheek. "I have to make this right." The atmosphere inside the house felt heavier than the morning dew outside, the kind that clings to your clothes and chills you to the bone. Kayla had barely managed to compose herself when Russell walked back in from the backyard, his face set in a hard line, his eyes still flashing with anger. The sound of laughter and casual chatter from the next room, where their friends and family were gathering, was a stark contrast to the tension that crackled in the air between them. "Why, Kayla? Why would you do something like this without even a heads up?" Russell's voice was low but sharp, cutting through the small kitchen space. "It wasn't meant to be behind your back, Russ. I thought it would help. Those jokes about Daniel's eyes, the comments at the last family reunion. It's not right. We needed to silence them," Kayla explained, her voice pleading for understanding. "So you just went and got a DNA test? Like I'm some suspect in a court case." Russell's voice rose slightly, tinged with disbelief and hurt. "Russ, It's not like that. You know how your mum can be, and your uncles. It was just supposed to be a piece of paper to wave in their faces. To make them stop. Kayla's response was desperate, her hands gesturing wildly, mirroring the turmoil inside her. Russell shook his head, his eyes narrowing. And what about us? What about trust, Kayla? Did you think about how this would look? How it would feel? He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Finding out you're testing Daniel to prove I'm his dad. Russell, please, I didn't mean to undermine you. I didn't think. That's just it, Kayla. You didn't think. Not about us, not about me. Russell's voice was cold, his words slicing through her already fragile defenses. Kayla felt her throat tighten, her next words barely a whisper. I did it for us. For our peace. Can't you see that? Russell let out a humorless laugh, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Peace? You call this peace? This feels like betrayal, Kayla. The sound of a glass clinking against a bottle in the next room punctuated the silence that followed. Kayla reached out again, this time grabbing Russell's hand before he could pull away. I'm sorry, Russ. I truly am. Can we just? But Russell was already pulling his hand back, his expression hardening. I need some air, Kayla. We'll talk later. He didn't wait for her response, he just walked away, leaving Kayla standing in the middle of the kitchen, her hand still outstretched. As the door closed behind him, Kayla felt the weight of the situation settle on her shoulders. She glanced toward the living room, where she could hear Daniel laughing, oblivious to the storm around him. She wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and forced a smile. There were guests to attend to, an anniversary to celebrate, and a deep, growing ache in her heart that she had no idea how to heal. The rest of the evening unfolded like a surreal play in which Kayla felt she was both the audience and the reluctant lead. She moved mechanically, refilling drinks and laughing on cue, all the while feeling Russell's absence like a cold shadow at her side. The guests, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beyond their smiles and congratulations, continued to celebrate. Kayla's sister-in-law, Jenna, approached her with a bright smile, holding a glass of wine. Kayla, you outdid yourself this year. Everything looks wonderful. Jenna's enthusiasm was genuine, but it grated on Kayla's already frayed nerves. Thanks, Jenna. I'm just glad everyone could make it. Kayla managed a smile, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of Russell. Is Russell around? I haven't seen him since we arrived. Jenna's question was innocent enough, but it stung. He just needed some air. You know how it is. Kayla's reply was vague, her gaze finally resting on the empty chair where Russell should have been. Jenna, picking up on the tension, lowered her voice. Everything okay between you two? Kayla hesitated, then shook her head slightly. It's complicated. I don't really want to get into it right now. Jenna nodded, her expression softening. Whatever it is, Kayla, I'm here if you need to talk. Okay. Thanks, Jenna. I appreciate it. Kayla forced another smile, her heart sinking as she turned to greet another guest. As the evening wore on, Kayla felt her facade beginning to crack. With each passing hour, Russell's prolonged absence turned her worry into a gnawing anxiety. She excused herself and stepped into their bedroom, closing the door behind her. The quiet was a stark contrast to the laughter and music outside. She dialed Russell's number, her hands trembling slightly. The phone rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Russell, please come home. We need to talk. The guests won't notice if you're a bit off. Please. Her voice was a mix of desperation and weariness. She ended the call and sat on the edge of their bed, the enormity of what had transpired earlier crashing down on her. She buried her face in her hands, allowing herself a moment to just break down. A knock at the door startled her. She wiped her tears and composed herself before opening it. It was Vera, Russell's mother. Kayla, dear, is everything all right? You've been in here a while and... Well, I noticed Russell isn't around. Vera's tone was gentle, her concern evident. Kayla sighed, the fight leaving her in a rush. Vera, we had a fight. It's about Daniel and a DNA test. Vera's eyebrows shot up, a mixture of surprise and confusion crossing her face. A DNA test. But why? People have been talking, making jokes about his looks, questioning. Oh, Vera, it was supposed to help us shut down those rumors. Kayla's voice broke, the last of her defenses crumbling. Oh, Kayla. Vera stepped forward, wrapping her arms around her. Let me talk to him. Russell can be stubborn, but he needs to see the truth of things. You're his wife, and Daniel is his son, no matter what anyone says. Kayla nodded, grateful for the support but feeling the weight of the uncertainty about her future with Russell. Thank you, Vera. I just hope we can sort this out. As Vera left to find her son, Kayla returned to the party, her smile back in place, masking the turmoil beneath. Every laugh, every clink of glass, felt like a reminder of what she stood to lose. And as she watched Daniel playing with his cousins, oblivious to the adult complexities around him, she made a silent vow to protect her son, no matter the cost. As Kayla stepped back into the glow of the living room, her heart ached with a mixture of fear and resolve. The anniversary party was in full swing, with old friends sharing stories and laughter echoing off the walls. Kayla plastered a smile on her face, determined to keep the evening from sinking under the weight of her personal turmoil. As she navigated through clusters of guests, her father-in-law, Tom, flagged her down with a jovial wave. Kayla, come here. Come here, you've got to hear this one about Russell and the fishing trip last summer. He was already chuckling, ready to dive into the tale. Kayla wandered over, her smile strained but polite. Hi, Tom. I love that story, but give me just a moment, will you? I need to check on the cake. Of course, dear, but don't be long. We can't have a party without the star of the show. Tom's good-natured wink did little to ease her stress, but she appreciated the attempt. In the kitchen, Kayla leaned against the counter, taking a moment to breathe. The cake sat on the table, a beautiful creation of chocolate and strawberries, topped with delicate icing that spelled out happy anniversary. She stared at it, the words blurring as her thoughts drifted back to Russell. Where are you? Her contemplation was interrupted by a gentle touch on her shoulder. She turned to find her friend Mia, whose concerned eyes were searching her face. Kayla, you okay? You seem miles away tonight. Kayla forced a laugh, shaking her head. Just lost in the planning details, you know me. Mia didn't buy it. It's your party, Kay. You're supposed to enjoy it, not stress over it. Where's Russell? He's usually glued to your side at these things. He had to step out for a bit. The lie tasted bitter on Kayla's tongue. Mia's brow furrowed, but she nodded. Well, when he gets back, you two need a moment. It's your night, after all. Don't let it pass by. I won't. Thanks, Mia. Kayla squeezed her friend's hand, grateful for the support. With a deep breath, she lifted the cake and carried it into the dining room. Setting it down at the center of the table drew a round of applause and cheers. Speech, speech, the crowd chanted, turning their attention to her. Kayla stood beside the cake, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Each of you means so much to us, and as she paused, her eyes scanning the room for Russell, hoping by some miracle he'd walked in. But he hadn't. I just want to say how grateful I am for these years with Russell, for our family, and for all of you. Here's to many more years of love and laughter. Her voice held steady, but her heart wasn't in the words. The room erupted in cheers, and as the clinking of glasses filled the air, Kayla lit the candles on the cake. Make a wish, darling, someone called out. Kayla leaned forward, the flickering candles casting light on her face. Her wish was simple and silent. Let us find our way back to each other. With a deep breath, she blew out the candles, the smoke swirling up and disappearing into the air, much like her hopes for an easy resolution. As the evening progressed, Kayla moved through the motions, her smile a well-practiced mask. She cut the cake, served the guests, laughed at the right moments, but her eyes constantly flicked to the door, her heart skipping a beat with every new entry that wasn't Russell. Finally, as the last guests began to say their goodbyes, Kayla felt the walls she had built up all evening begin to crumble. She thanked everyone, her words warm but her spirit exhausted. When the door closed behind the final guest, the silence of the house settled around her like a heavy cloak. She sank down into a chair, the remnants of the party around her a stark reminder of the celebration that should have been. And in the quiet aftermath she allowed herself the tears she had held at bay, her loneliness a stark contrast to the laughter that had filled the room just hours before. The house had finally quieted down, the last of the guests drifting off into the night with warm hugs and cheerful goodbyes. Kayla was mechanically stacking dishes in the dishwasher, the clink of china barely registering in her fog of emotions. Her mind replayed the evening's events, each moment tinged with the absence of her husband. The sound of soft footsteps behind her made her turn. It was Vera, Russell's mother, lingering awkwardly by the kitchen doorway, a look of concern etched across her face. "Kayla, honey, can we talk?" Vera's voice was gentle, her usual boisterous energy tempered by the gravity of the situation. "Of course." Kayla wiped her hands on a dish towel, forcing a tired smile. "What's on your mind?" Vera took a deep breath, crossing the room to stand beside Kayla at the sink. "It's about Russell. And this mess with the DNA test. I couldn't help overhearing a bit earlier. Is everything all right?" Her eyes were full of worry, the lines around them deepening. Kayla sighed, a knot of emotion tightening in her throat. "No, it's not all right. It's a long story, Vera. I got a DNA test done because of all those jokes about Daniel not looking like Russell. I thought it would stop the whispers, but it just made things worse." Vera's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A DNA test? That sounds drastic, dear. But I understand those jokes were getting out of hand. And Russell's reaction. He's convinced that Daniel isn't his son, despite the IVF, despite everything. He won't even listen to me." Kayla's voice cracked, betraying her desperation. Vera reached out, her hand covering Kayla's. "Oh, my dear, Russell can be so stubborn. Like his father was." She shook her head, her expression softening. "I'll talk to him. He needs to hear some sense from someone who isn't caught up in the storm." "Thank you, Vera. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm losing him," Kayla confessed, the weight of her fears spilling over. Vera squeezed Kayla's hand reassuringly. "You won't lose him, not if I have anything to say about it. Russell loves you, and he loves Daniel. He's just scared, and he's letting that fear drive him right now." Kayla nodded, grateful for Vera's support but unsure if it would be enough. "I hope you're right." Vera smiled, a warm, matronly smile that seemed to push back some of the evening's chill. "Let me handle Russell. You just take care of yourself and that little boy of yours." With a plan tentatively in place, Vera left Kayla in the kitchen, her departure leaving a bittersweet sense of hope mingling with Kayla's lingering doubts. Kayla resumed her cleaning, her thoughts a whirl of potential futures none certain, all of them shadowed by the spectre of the night's revelations. As she scrubbed at a stubborn spot on a plate, her phone buzzed. She wiped her hands and checked it, hoping for a message from Russell, but it was just a reminder for Daniel's upcoming doctor's appointment. She sighed and put the phone away, her heart sinking as the silence of the house wrapped around her once again. Her eyes drifted to the hallway where Daniel was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the turmoil his parents were facing. Kayla promised herself in that quiet kitchen, under the dim light of the overhead bulb, that no matter what happened between her and Russell, she would protect Daniel's happiness above all else. After Vera left, the weight of the evening's events seemed to grow heavier around Kayla. She couldn't shake the feeling of impending loss, the silent house echoing with the ghostly laughter of the party that had just ended. Each tick of the clock was a stark reminder of the growing distance between her and Russell. Finally, unable to bear the hollow silence of the living room, Kayla made her way upstairs to Daniel's room. The soft glow of the nightlight illuminated his peaceful face, his chest rising and falling with each calm breath. Watching him sleep, she felt a surge of protectiveness and love that momentarily pushed aside her anxieties. She sat down on the edge of his bed, her hand gently stroking his hair. "Oh, Danny, what are we going to do?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, startling her in the quiet room. She pulled it out, her heart leaping with a mix of hope and dread. It was a text from Russell. I need some time to think. Don't wait up. Kayla read the message several times, each word sinking like a stone in her stomach. She typed a response, her thumbs trembling. We need to talk, Russell. This isn't just about us, it's about Daniel too. But after a moment of hesitation, she deleted it and placed the phone back in her pocket. He knows where we are, she thought bitterly. The stillness of the house felt suffocating, and Kayla couldn't stand to sit idly while her marriage seemed to crumble. She decided to pack a small bag for herself and Daniel, just a few essentials for a night or two. Just until things cooled down, she reassured herself, though she couldn't ignore the nagging fear that this might be more than a temporary retreat. She moved quietly through the bedroom, gathering clothes, a few of Daniel's favorite books, and his stuffed bear. Every item she placed in the bag felt like a confirmation of their fractured family, each zipper closure a silent echo of the space growing between her and Russell. Once the bag was packed, she paused, looking around the room that held so many memories of their life together. The photos on the walls, the trinkets from family vacations, the air heavy with the lingering scent of their shared life, it all felt suddenly foreign. With a deep breath, Kayla picked up the bag and went back downstairs. She wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter. Russell, AE. I've taken Daniel to my sister's. We'll be okay there for a few days. Please call me when you're ready to talk. I love you and I believe we can get past this, but I can't do it alone. Kayla. She placed the house keys next to the note, a symbolic gesture of her willingness to return, to fix things, if only Russell would meet her halfway. Turning off the lights and locking the door behind her, Kayla carried Daniel to the car, his head resting against her shoulder, blissfully unaware of the night's heavy decisions. As she drove away, the familiar street seemed blurred, obscured not just by the darkness but also by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Sitting in the quiet refuge of her sister's guest room later, Kayla held Daniel close, whispering promises of better days ahead. Despite the comfort of her sister's home, the room felt stark and temporary, a far cry from the warmth of her own bed and the man she still loved. Despite everything. As she drifted into a restless sleep, her last conscious thought was a fervent hope for reconciliation, not just for her sake, but for Daniel's too. Kayla spent a sleepless night at her sister's house, tossing and turning as the clock ticked ominously in the silent room. As dawn broke, she resolved to take action. She couldn't let the situation fester any longer, not with so much at stake. After getting Daniel breakfast and settling him with some toys, Kayla retreated to the kitchen to make a series of calls. She first reached out to the IVF clinic, her voice steady despite the tremor of nerves. Hi, this is Kayla Henderson. My husband and I had a procedure done there a few years ago, and I have some urgent questions about the paternity documentation and process. The clinic was understanding but requested formal requests and identification for privacy reasons. Frustrated but determined, Kayla agreed, setting the wheels in motion to get the necessary paperwork. Next, she called the lab that had processed the DNA test. I need to speak with someone about a test result that could be an error. It's urgent, she insisted firmly when the receptionist hesitated. Finally, she got through to a lab technician. I understand your concern, Mrs. Henderson. Let me pull up the records. Could you give me the case ID? Kayla read off the numbers, her hand gripping the phone tightly. The technician paused, and then there was a soft clatter of keys. Ah, I see the issue here, the technician finally said. It appears there was a mix-up with the samples from another case. It's extremely rare, but it does happen. We're deeply sorry for this oversight. Kayla's relief was palpable, her breath releasing in a rush. So what you're saying is the results were not accurate. They're not my husband's. That's correct. We will rerun the test at no cost to you, of course, and expedite the results. Again, I apologize for the distress this has caused. Hanging up, Kayla felt a mixture of emotions flood through her. Anger at the mistake, relief at the explanation, and a resurgence of hope. She knew she needed to share this with Russell immediately. She dialed Russell's number, her heart pounding. This time, he answered. Kayla, his voice was cautious, wary. Russell, I've just spoken to the lab. There was a mistake, a mix-up with the samples. The DNA results were wrong. She rushed out, desperate to bridge the chasm between them. There was a pause, and she could almost hear him processing the information. "Are you sure?" "Yes," they confirmed it. "They're redoing the test, but Russ, this means Daniel is ours." There was never any doubt in the paternity. The silence stretched out before Russell finally spoke, his voice thick. I don't know what to say, Kayla. I'm sorry for how I reacted, for everything." "It's okay. We just need to sort this out together. Can we meet, please?" "Yes, of course. Let's meet." They agreed to meet at a nearby park, a neutral space away from the memories and tensions of home. As Kayla drove to the park, her mind was a whirlwind of potential outcomes. She rehearsed what she might say, how she might bridge the distance between them, restore what had been so carelessly fractured. When she saw Russell waiting by the duck pond, a familiar ache tugged at her heart. He stood there, looking lost and somehow smaller than she remembered. As she approached, their eyes met, and for a moment, nothing else existed. The mistakes, the pain, the separation all faded. They walked together in silence for a few steps before Kayla reached out, tentatively taking his hand. Russell's fingers curled around hers, a wordless acknowledgement of the hurt and hope entwined between them. "Let's fix this," Russell said softly, his voice carrying a weight of sincerity. "Yes, let's start over," Kayla replied, squeezing his hand. Together, they walked through the park, their shadows merging and mingling on the path, a symbol of their renewed commitment to face the future, not as adversaries but as allies, strengthened by truth and a deeper understanding of each other's fears and dreams. The park was quiet, save for the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant laughter of children. Kayla and Russell found a secluded bench beside the pond, where the only witnesses to their conversation were a few curious ducks. Russell looked at Kayla, taking a deep breath before he spoke. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, his voice hesitant. "About us, about everything. I reacted poorly, and I'm sorry for that. I let my fears and pride get in the way." Kayla nodded, her eyes meeting his. "It's been tough, Russ, but finding out about the mix-up at the lab, it's a relief. It doesn't fix everything, but it's a start." Russell squeezed her hand. "I know, and I'm sorry for doubting you, for doubting us. I was hurt, and I handled it wrong. Can you forgive me?" "There's nothing to forgive," Kayla replied softly. "We both got caught up in this mess. What matters is how we move forward." Russell looked around the park, then back at Kayla. "I want to do better, Kay. For you, for Daniel. For us." Kayla smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through her. "I want that too. Let's take it one day at a time. Rebuild where we need to. Communicate more. Trust more." "Yes, exactly," Russell's expression brightened. "And maybe some counseling? I think it might help us deal with things better in the future." "I'd like that," Kayla agreed, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. "And let's make sure we're keeping things fun too. Date nights, family outings. Remember how we used to explore the city when we first met?" Russell laughed, a light, happy sound. "I remember. You hated my choice of restaurants." Kayla chuckled. "I still do, but I love trying them with you." They sat together in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the ducks glide across the pond. The serenity of the setting sun reflected their newfound calm. "Kayla, whatever comes next, I want you to know. I love you." "More than ever," Russell said earnestly, turning to face her. "I love you too, Russ. We'll get through this." Together, Kayla leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling for the first time in a long while that things were truly going to be okay. As they stood to leave, Russell stopped and looked at Kayla with a mischievous grin. "Race you to the car." Kayla laughed, the sound mingling with the evening breeze. "You're on, but no cheating this time." They took off running, the stress and shadows of the past few weeks falling away with each playful step. It wasn't just a race to the car, it was a race back to each other, a promise of a future filled with more understanding and fewer doubts. As they reached the car, breathless and laughing, Kayla felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had weathered a storm, but their commitment to each other had proven strong enough to hold. Now, with a clear path ahead, they were ready to face whatever challenges might come, knowing that together they were unbreakable. Months after the turmoil that had threatened to unravel their family, Kayla and Russell sat on their back porch, watching Daniel play in the fading sunlight of the early evening. They each had a cup of coffee, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming jasmine from their garden. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about everything we went through," Kayla said, her voice contemplative. "It's strange how something so challenging can end up teaching us so much about ourselves and each other." Russell nodded, his eyes following Daniel as he chased a butterfly across the yard. "I know. I learned that being vulnerable isn't the same as being weak. Opening up to you about my fears. It was hard, but it brought us closer." Kayla smiled, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "And I learned that no matter how tough things get, there's always a way forward if we stick together. Trust is fragile, but we've built it back stronger." Russell turned to her, his expression serious but tender. "I'm sorry for the pain I caused, but I'm grateful for the chance to make things right. You and Daniel mean everything to me." Kayla's eyes softened. "I know, Russ, and you mean everything to us. We're a team, remember? For better or for worse." Russell chuckled. "For better, please. I think we've had enough of the worse for a while." Agreed, Kayla laughed, and they both turned their attention back to Daniel. "Hey, Mum, Dad, look. I caught the butterfly." Daniel came running over, cupping a small butterfly gently in his hands. It sat calmly, its wings a brilliant mosaic of colours. "Wow, that's beautiful, Danny. But you know, we should let it go. It needs to be free," Kayla said gently. Daniel looked thoughtfully at the butterfly, then nodded. "Okay, Mummy, I'll let it go. Because we love it, right?" "Exactly," Buddy Russell said, ruffling his son's hair. "Because we love it." They watched as Daniel opened his hands, the butterfly lingering for just a moment before taking flight, soaring over the garden and disappearing into the twilight. Kayla leaned her head on Russell's shoulder. "It's funny how things work out. That little butterfly is like us, isn't it? A little bit of struggle, but in the end it flies higher and more beautifully than before." Russell kissed the top of her head. "Yes, and just like that butterfly, we've found our way back to each other. We're stronger for it, flying higher together." The evening settled around them, the sky painted with the hues of sunset. They sat in silence, a family once again whole, their hearts lighter and filled with renewed love and understanding. As they watched Daniel play, now chasing the shadows as the sun dipped below the horizon, both Kayla and Russell knew they had crossed a crucial bridge. The lessons they had learned about love, forgiveness, and resilience would guide them through whatever lay ahead, with the assurance that they would face it united, their bond unbreakable. Write in the comments how you liked the story. And we continue. Let us know in the comments how this story has inspired you, or share your own experiences of overcoming adversity. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories like this one. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest uploads. Your journey through the complexities of the human heart starts now. Remember, your story isn't over yet. It's just a new chapter beginning. Stay strong, stay inspired.